Okay, welcome everybody to the session called How AI Can Challenge the Status Quo, a Founders Dialogue. I'd like to introduce myself and Ilit. Maybe Ilit, you start with that?
Yeah?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I'll start. I'm Ilit. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Joonko. Originally from Israel, moved to the Bay Area about 7-8 months ago. I don't like it very much. Spent most of my career at the intelligence unit back in Israel. Worked on AI products way before San Francisco thought AI is a cool thing. It was like 15 years ago. I'll tell a little bit about Joonko later, but in one sentence, we basically do a diversity and inclusion coach that is all based on AI and machine learning technologies. Florian, what about you?
So my name is Florian. I run a company called Usersnap. We're based in Austria. We moved to the Bay Area half a year ago. And Usersnap is a product building platform which allows you to get in touch with your customers and users and to understand them on a different level than before. And speaking of different levels, I'd like to ask you, Ilit, what's the status quo in your industry? What's the status quo in diversity? What's going on wrong, basically?
So I think the biggest status quo, or what everyone think the problem is we have a pipeline problem. Like there is not enough women going to STEM or want to go and work for tech companies. There are quite a few women in the crowd and a lot of women in Dreamforce. And I think like working on the product and looking into what we see with our customers, the problem is not at the top of the funnel. Like there are enough diverse people that apply. If you know where to look for them, or if you want to look for them. I think it starts with if you want to look for them, if you really think it's important, if you're really not cutting a slug for yourself, saying, there's not enough. If they wanted to apply, they would have applied. It doesn't really work like this. So I think that's the biggest status quo around like diversity, people thinking this is not us as tech companies' problem. It's like, education need to take care of it first before we can actually benefit from it. So I think that's the most common thing that you can hear about it. What about customer experience and online? What is like the status quo?
Sure. I think, the status quo in my industry, which is customer experience basically, is that people still either ignore the problem, that the customer actually decides on products based on experience. And that's one big part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that people who actually care about customer experience, they're working with methods from the past. So they get their peer groups in the company, doing interviews. And that's a good start, but it doesn't scale. And, it's also very expensive. So, in a way, customer experience is something which happens every single day, no matter if this is a B2C or B2B game, right? In a way, everyone has experiences with products. And I think since there's a lot of product categories which are very competitive, the actual experience will change the game, will make the decision, will make the customer buy product A or B. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and maybe we can talk a little bit about how we leverage AI.
And how do we changing the status quo?
How to change the status quo. I think that.
Do you want to start sharing a little bit about how you do it?
Yeah, actually, when we started thinking about how can we leverage AI within our product portfolio, we made a very, very simple observation. And the observation is, if I was sitting next to you in front of a computer and you working with a product with Gmail or with Salesforce, I can very easily tell you if you're having a good experience or not by simply watching you, right? Not even your face. I can watch you interacting with a web application, clicking, double-clicking, moving around, scrolling up and down, stuff like that. So you have certain patterns which are linked with happiness or customer experience. And we thought, if I can tell you if you're happy, an AI could tell you. And that's our approach. Because I'm not scalable, I'm just one guy. But that's where we started thinking about, is it possible to extract somehow a number which represents your experience? And surprisingly, it is very simple with AI. right? You feed them your interaction data, and you get out a number which correlates with your experience. And that's how we think about challenging the status quo. It's not that you can skip the user interviews. It's not that you need to talk with all your customers. But the question is, can we do better? Can we do this in real time? Can we identify problems of your digital product before maybe even you identified them? Because experience are very, very individual, and maybe on average the product works well, but particularly there are some problems you need to identify. So that was the main idea we started with when we started with the whole AI implementation within Usersnap. So Ilit, what's your take? How do you challenge the status quo? And how far have you come?
Sure. So for me, the intersection of diversity and inclusion and AI was totally by mistake. When I started the company, I didn't know diversity and inclusion in the US is like such a huge thing. I didn't know AI is even such a huge thing. It was easy for me, being a woman in the tech industry, to kind of like think it can be an awesome opportunity and time to try and tackle the issue. And most of my experience, like I said, comes from AI. So I didn't go to these specific topics and kind of like, how can I take these two most common buzzwords in the Silicon Valley and put them together? And when I started to dig in, I was like, wow, everyone is talking about diversity and inclusion. Like in Israel, it's not such a big thing. So I think it was an interesting journey for me to kind of like understand how we challenge a completely different market in the industry of diversity and inclusion. And what I saw was two main stuff. One was most of the companies today are trying to tick this box of we did something. So it's either training or mentoring or using a big consulting firm and having this tick of the box, while it doesn't really make any change to anyone. It doesn't change anything for companies. It doesn't change anything for women and people of color in the industry. And I felt like, okay, that's nice, but it doesn't change anything. And I started to read a lot about like why it doesn't work. And the reason that it doesn't work is like it's a one-size-fits-all. Everyone goes to the same training, where you're a marketing person, a salesperson, a developer, a recruiter. It doesn't really matter. If you're an executive, a junior, everyone goes to the same training. Maybe you're doing like a hiring manager training, but that's it. And I thought AI can do a tailor-made solution for everyone in the company. And this is basically what we do. So in a nutshell, we automatically connect to different SaaS platforms in a company. So it can be Salesforce, but it can be your recruiting platform, email, Slack, Jira, whatever. And what we do is basically looking to the patterns in the data that points to unconscious biases and then immediately alert with the solution. So imagine, and I know it has like a bad context, but I'll use it anyway because this is where I brought the idea from. It's basically an antivirus for biases. As long as you're doing well, you're not going to hear from us. And then when you're not doing very well, which a lot of people don't do very well, you're going to get either a Slack message or an email say, hey, this is what's happening, and here is how you can fix it. So it's always going to come with a solution. I think the awesome thing that we've seen, especially working on recruiting with a lot of companies, is how unaware people are to what they're doing. A lot of people think like, yeah, I got to so many trainings and everyone is talking about it, like, I'm not biased. I'm a good person. I think this stuff can go, you can be biased and a good person. I think everyone here, like they're like, I don't know, 180,000 people in the conference, everyone is biased in one way or another. So I think this is the most amazing thing that we've seen along the way, is like people are so unaware how biased they are. And the fact that we can kind of like tailor-made, hey, this is where you're almost doing a mistake, here's how you can go ahead, like go step back and fix it. I think this is where most of the challenge is kind of like starting to show results as we move forward. How do you see the future of customer experience going? Like, where do you see it going?
I think it will be very, very individualized. So let's say in 5 years' time from now, I think the customer experience might be even an individual one. So there's no single user experience within applications. There might be parts where it's very individualized, and I think one of this individualized experience can be already seen on the web with advertisement, right? So I get my very, very own ads being displayed on different content networks. And I think applications can also follow this part where you get a very specific experience tailored to my needs. And the future will be that this is a seamless procedure, right? So maybe maybe our code identifies friction within the flow of the application and removes these frictions automatically. This is maybe a little bit too far off, but I totally see this happen. So it's walking away from averages where you have a score of 95% customer satisfaction to, well, we try to do 100% on each individual user. So this is possible with AI, and I get the feeling that this will be possible in the future.
What do you see with your customers today? Like, do they manage to get over the 95%?
I think 100% should be the goal here.
Do you think it's a reasonable goal? Like 100% is, I think, a perfect website or a perfect experience?
It should be a perfect experience, and I think one of the unknown unknowns is that the 5%. So if you have 95% happy customers, the question is why are the 5%, the remaining 5%, not happy? And this could be due to, well, someone can't see colors or don't perceive information the way the majority perceives the information. So in a way, this is basically touching your part, because product managers are averaged on those, right? They're not thinking about minorities, how people with weak eyes or something like that perceive information differently. So I think this can also be a very efficient way to identify those spots where you need to work on specific user experience for a specific target group. And with AI, this is possible because it scales. It tells you the whole story. How do you see the future of how can, in 5 years' time, how can I work or recruit better? How can I remove my implicit biases I have?
So I think the first step, and I hope it's going to take less than 5 years for people to understand, is like you can't really remove biases. It's part of the brain that we all have, hopefully. It's basically the reason that when you see a tiger, you run. That's thanks to your unconscious bias. So you probably don't want to remove this. But I think, and it's really, really hard when you're busy and doing your work while you're recruiting under a lot of pressure or assigning tasks or whatever, to think about these unconscious biases. This is like part of the unconscious thing in the brain is what caused this fight or flight mode. So when you're under a lot of pressure, you do what is most common for you, which is like hiring people like me, for example. So I think is the quicker people are going to understand that they can leverage technology, whether it's Joonko and others, like there's tons of technologies around focusing on recruiting, on HR, on diversity. I think this industry is blowing, and I'm out of the mic. And I hear a lot of companies that when we reach out, they say, we're taking care of it, we're fine. Like, we don't have a problem. And I'm like, maybe you want to revisit this phrase. So I think the first thing we're going to see in the next few years is more and more companies that are much smaller than Salesforce really acknowledge the fact that they have a problem and reaching out not to what is common for everyone, which is like trainings, but actually understand like technology is not going to replace me, but it's going to make me a better recruiter, HR person.
I think your mic is sometimes switching off.
And I think leveraging technology is going to be more and more common in the industry of diversity, which I think going to start showing more and more results. And I think another important thing that I wish to see is diversity and inclusion is now the Fortune 500 company's problem. I think it's a problem for us being a 7-people company. It's a problem for 100 people company. It should be, everyone should think that they have this problem. And the smaller you are, probably the easier to grow into a better company. imagine a company like Salesforce, for them to make the change, that's really, really hard. But if you're a 10 people company, you want to improve, it's probably going to be easier doing it now. So I hope to see more and more small, medium companies actually owning the fact that they have a problem and they need to make a change.
Okay, so I have a specific question. So I'm pretty sure there are a couple of representatives of Fortune 500 companies here. So what's the first step to get into this process? I mean, your application is ready to deploy as far as I know?
So it's ready to deploy. It's even not that expensive.
But how can, like in a big industry, a big corporate structure, who's the person, if I was like in a big company, who should I talk to if this is something I feel it's important?
So I think you should start with your manager, and not just relying on HR to fix it. I also think you need to talk with HR. If you have a diversity person like Salesforce has, like Tony, so go ahead and reach to his team or her team. Reach to HR, your manager. I think a lot of the successful stuff that's happening in diversity and inclusion for a lot of companies are stuff that's coming from the employees up and not from the management down. Like ERG groups and stuff like this comes actually from the employees themselves. So just do one thing. It can be a really small thing, like have a talk for female engineers or whatever. Just do one thing. And if you really want to make it change in the long run, you need to start measuring. I don't know any person here doing whatever, sales, marketing, R&D, who doesn't measure their day-to-day stuff when they want to improve. If you want to improve diversity and inclusion, you have to start measuring. Like that's the only option, I'm guessing, to improve and fix stuff, and you can't measure what you don't know. So like you can't fix what you don't know, so you have to measure.
Yeah.
We have like 2 minutes.
Maybe we have 2 minutes. I think questions? We can close.
Yeah, or if anyone has a question, go for it. You need to speak out really loud.
Maybe we can repeat the question.
Sure. So the question was like, for diversity and inclusion, what do we present to individuals or a company? So we have two different representations. On day-to-day, we reach out to the individuals in the company that can have the biggest effect on what's happening now. So if you have an interview with a woman, and all along the process, she only met with male interviewers, so we're going to reach out to the hiring manager and say, hey, you might want to invite a woman or assign this to this woman to kind of like make sure this individual are going to meet people like them on the interview process. Or reach out to a sales manager or a development, or what. It doesn't really matter where you are on the chain. We're going to reach out to the individual who can contribute the most on improving this, what we call micro event. And then one step forward, up, is representing monthly and quarterly reports on both the engagement with the system. So how often do you engage? Do you follow it? What is the impact of the engagements? And how do you do as a company? Like, how did you improve along the process? And this is what we basically show them. Like, it's on day-to-day, it's going to be really small stuff with really quick solutions. And on a high level, as an executive, you're going to get reports that shows you the progress and how you're doing. All right, awesome.
All right.
I think we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.